Okay, it should be recording right now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And this is the first episode of season two. We are rejoined by De Zayas, the wonderful, independent diplomat and scholar and intellectual who was the former special UN rapporteur on economic rights and self-determination, who slammed the war for oil in Venezuela. He's an expert on all things related to imperialism and international law. He is joining us, and we're going to be talking about three topics, hopefully. The first one is going to be Julian Assange. So, first of all, Mr. De Zayas, thank you so much for coming back on the show, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
And
It's be better than last year.
hopefully, hopefully this pandemic kindly, buggers off. Now, Mr. De Zayas, you wanted to. So the first topic that you wanted to talk about was the partial victory of Julian Assange, who's not going to be extradited to the United States, but as the great Frank Zappa said, said the torture never stops. So, what is your reaction to that, as well as the ongoing persecution of Julian Assange? And yes, take it from there.
Good morning again. Now, Yuri, you know that I personally visited Julian Assange in 2015 when I was preparing my report to the General Assembly concerning the so-called free trade agreements and the investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms built into those agreements. Wikileaks had published these super secret agreements, and it was very useful for me to spend 3 hours with him. I was quite impressed by his intelligence, his coherence, his integrity. And I find it disgraceful how the mainstream media has colluded in character assassination, and how, as my colleague Niels Meltzer, the UN rapporteur on torture, has discovered, how the United States, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Ecuador all colluded on this affair. It is a scandal of major proportions when countries ostensibly under the rule of law completely disregard the rule of law, directly influence the actions of the administration of justice in Sweden. They frame Assange with false claims of rape, which that's what allowed for Sweden to issue an international arrest warrant. Absolutely ridiculous on the non-evidence that was there against them. So absolutely a corruption of the system by countries that you would expect would be the defenders of the rule of law. So here we have a major breakdown, and also the collusion of the mainstream media, because they participated in the persecution of Assange. And obviously, Assange was at that moment well advised to ask for diplomatic asylum from Ecuador, which under the government of Rafael Correa was normal. And of course, Ecuador granted it. And then after Rafael Correa finished his 10 years as president, and Lenin Moreno, his successor, came in, Lenin Moreno let himself be put under pressure by the United States, and then he expelled Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. That's where I had visited Julian Assange in 2015. Now, this expulsion was a clear violation of Article 33 of the Geneva Refugee Convention. I mean, it's absolutely grotesque that someone who has every claim to be persecuted, every argument under the Geneva Refugee Convention, that the country that had given him asylum would turn him over to the country that is persecuting him. Absolutely absurd, but that is exactly what happened. But again, with the collusion of the established media, the corporate media, what I call the plutocratic media. Now, this decision of the 4th of January not to extradite him now to the United States on the basis that he has suffered psychological torture, that his mental condition is such that if he were sent to the United States, there's there's grounds to believe that he may attempt suicide, etc., etc. Now, having said that, and this decision of the British judge has been now appealed by the United States. They really want to get him. Problem is that the judge simply dismissed the major arguments. The major arguments for denying a request of extradition. And any decent judge would have thrown the case out as frivolous and vexatious. It's quite clear that Assange is a journalist. It's quite clear that what he has done is all legitimate. What he has done is protected by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 19. It is quite clear that the profession of a journalist entails doing exactly that. I mean, he is not the whistleblower who has actually stolen information that is classified. He is the journalist. He's the medium that brings it to us. And actually, he brings it to us as a service to democracy, as a service to the American people, as a service to the world, because we do not want covers up. We do not want a country to engage in major war crimes and crimes against humanity and be able to get away with it in total impunity, as has been the case now. And as you may remember, 4 weeks ago, Donald Trump granted amnesty to the only 4 American war criminals who had been convicted 2014 for the 2007 massacre in Baghdad. So you see,
and George W. Bush and his neocon cults are going to be invited to Joe Biden's big inauguration. So,
no, the whole thing is a disgrace. We will talk about that still because I have things to say about that. But going back to Assange, the fact is that he has the right to be protected under the Geneva Convention. Moreover, his country of nationality, Australia, has the obligation in international law to exercise diplomatic protection on his behalf. The way that Australia has thrown him under the bus is again a disgrace for a country that is at all self-respecting. This is something that shocks you. Now, obviously, as an Australian citizen, he should be able to return to his country of origin, Australia. On the other hand, that would not necessarily be any better than the situation he's in now, because Australia also has an extradition agreement with the United States. And it would be, again, put under jeopardy, and he would also have to defend himself in Australia. So Australia is not the country that is going to respect his human rights or respect the Geneva Convention. Having said that, Why does the judge do what she does? As I said, as a professor of international law, I think that she is wrong on the law as far as not applying this jus cogens principle of non-refoulement. This is not just Geneva Refugee Convention. This is customary international law. You cannot expel, deport, extradite a person who is going to suffer persecution when he arrives at the other end. And that is exactly what happened to Assange. And as I said, that which he's accused of is precisely that category of activity, which is political activity, which is, and the journalistic activity, which is protected under international law. So now, to add insult to injury, the judge denies him bail. Article 9 of the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the United Kingdom is a party to the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, obliges the country, obliges the courts to grant a bail in 99% of the cases, unless there is a very major reason not to. For instance, she said there is the danger or the risk of flight. It's preposterous. This man who is physically devastated, this man who has suffered so enormously over the last 10 years, this man needs to go into rehabilitation for months before he is even capable.
Well, and also not just psychologically, but when I had Chris Marsden on the show, the National Secretary of the Socialist Equality Party and a contributor to the World Socialist website, we talked about the persecution of Julian Assange, and he said that Julian Assange actually has a lung condition which he's not been properly treated of. I think he even has some some problems with his dental care, which has not been properly treated of. And at Belmarsh prison, where he's in prison right now, there's been outbreaks of pandemics, and we know that he's not getting adequate. And we know that he's not getting adequate medical treatment there. So
yeah, they're hoping that he will get ill and die. They're just hoping that this thing goes away because he simply dies off. It is so cynical. It is so disgusting for countries under the rule of law. I mean, the judge here should have said that we are facing a classical example of what is termed lawfare. Here is a classical example of the United States making enormous pressure on the United Kingdom so as to, prolong this affair as long as possible. Maybe he dies in the process. But the British courts are losing their credibility and their authority by lending themselves to political lawfare. Now, what can the international community do besides protesting? The Working Group on Arbitrary Detention already in 2019 determined there was a violation of Article 9 and that he had to be released immediately. Of course, the United Kingdom ignored that. I myself put out 3 press releases. The rapporteur on torture has put out several press releases, has specifically asked the United Kingdom to release him, has protested now that bail was not granted, and the United Kingdom blithely ignores all of that. So we are in a situation where the defenders of law are those who are actually violating law, and thereby doing considerable damage to the authority of the system. That, of course, we're seeing in the United States in the case of Mr. Trump, but it is, in the case of Trump, is really not a black and white situation. It is a black and black situation because the Democratic Party has been acting in a most undemocratic manner, and instead of trying to find some form of de-escalating the problem, of reconciling the country, they are pyromaniacs. They are throwing fuel on the fire. And the idea of now appealing to Article 25 of the U.S. Constitution, it's ridiculous. It does not apply. It is as ridiculous as Guaido when he invoked Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution to declare himself interim president. It doesn't apply. Read the article, read the 25th Amendment, read Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution. It does not apply in the case.
Yeah.
But you see that we have this situation of complete disregard of the law, complete disregard of constitutions, and then a mainstream media that supports it, that tries to make it plausible, because the listeners of these programs, they're not necessarily lawyers. They haven't gone to Harvard Law School. They have not gone to Oxford or Cambridge or anything of that nature. I mean, the average citizen relies on what he reads in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, or what he hears in CNN, and he parrots all of that. You regurgitate all the propaganda that you're getting. But
yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was watching the, I have like a Friday ritual where I watch, whatever lighthearted program is on the BBC with my parents. And we like to watch the Graham Norton show, and they were talking about how when the AIDS epidemic broke out in the 80s, there were many people who denied that AIDS even existed. Just like you have some people who say that COVID doesn't exist. And then they got into a little mini conversation about how do you combat fake news and stuff like that. And one of the guys, on the program, David Mitchell, who does a very good comedy show called Would I Lie to You, he was saying, I don't know how you combat fake news. I think we need to trust establishment news more. And I was thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? The same establishment news that peddled anti-Russia conspiracy theories, that sold us the Iraq War, the Libya War, the Syria war, the war for oil in Venezuela. You think that the issue of fake news is for us to trust the biggest peddlers of fake news? Like, come on, get the F out of here.
A lot of people think that way. And there is this suggestion that you read again and again. They auto-proclaim themselves the quality press. So New York Times is the quality press. So you're supposed to believe them. Now, once they lied, once they manipulated, once they, shall we say, disinformed the world with regard to Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, you cannot trust them. The only thing that the viewers of this program and the readers can do is self-help. Self-help is go on the internet and read what there is in Gray Zone. Read what there is in the Intersect. Read what there is in the Real News Network. See what the Chinese are saying about this. It's interesting. CGTN.
or Press TV or even RT, and I'm not, and you don't have to agree with every point of view that that somebody on RT or Press TV or the Chinese outlet that you mentioned, or even the Real News Network, and I certainly have my issues with the Intercept democracy now, and much of like that. But to get an understanding of the world, and in order to be objective, you need to listen to sort of all points of views, and politics is not like a science where there's a scientific consensus climate change exists, or that there are real infectious diseases like the AIDS epidemic, coronavirus, because I just finished reading Eve Engler's fantastic book, A Propaganda System, about how governments, media, and academia sell wars and exploitation. So there needs to be more programs in more programs in how to debunk propaganda, and have a much better understanding of why
Well,
international affairs breaks down.
The commentators in CGTN and RT very frequently do that. And you can see their credentials. Most of these authors who publish op-eds in RT and CGTN are really well-weathered journalists, or professors of law, or professors of history, professors of economics. They're not idiots. They have decades of experience, and they can be British, Irish, Scottish, American, French, German. You look at the names, and you realize here is an individual who probably would like to see his article published in the mainstream media, but he cannot place it. The same as me,
because he's engaging in inconvenient truth telling and myth busting.
You would think that as the first United Nations rapporteur to go to Venezuela in 21 years, that upon my return to Geneva, that CNN would have called me and said, "Desires, what do you think about this?" New York Times, Washington Post. I just didn't exist. Since I don't sing the song they want to hear, I do not exist. So all of these individuals who write and publish in RT is probably because they tried to place their op-eds with the New York Times or Washington Post, and they've gotten no, no, and no. Same experience.
And then even left-leaning outlets, because a group of people that you forgot to denounce in this trial by witch hunt that Julian Assange has suffered from. There's also even left-leaning outlets, and even NGOs have jumped the shark, so to speak, in throwing Julian Assange under the bus. This is why RT, Telesur, and other outlets give a platform to other, independent-minded voices to, speak out against, the latest imperial adventure in, say, Syria, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and defending Julian Assange to the bitter end. And actually, one question I have to ask before we get on to two other topics I wanted to revisit you is, okay, so the Julian Assange case, so he's not going to be extradited to the U.S., but he still is incarcerated in Belmarsh. The U.S. is appealing the ruling of the British judge. So is that why Julian Assange is still stuck in Belmarsh, because the battle over trying to free him or sending him to the U.S. is still ongoing upon this appeal that the U.S. government is doing?
Well, I'm not even sure that the decision of the 4th of January was not a piece in the strategy to extradite him. What that decision meant to me is to dismiss all the strong arguments to deny asylum. I mean, the arguments that in international law are binding, like non-refoulement. And then saying, oh, well, for humanitarian reasons, we cannot send them all. So what's going to happen? The United States is going to try to persuade the judge that they will take so good care of Assange, that he will have all of the medical care he needs, etc., so that he can be actually extradited.
Okay.
I think it is part of a game. I'm not sure that a reasonable judge could possibly have written that judgment because she would have had to say the principle of non-refoulement applies fully. The man is a journalist. His right to work as a journalist is protected in international law. The United Kingdom is a party to the Geneva Convention. The United Kingdom is a party to the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Point final. Case dismissed. And then, of course, he's entitled to compensation for the suffering that he has endured through this witch hunt, through this illegal persecution he has been subjected to. But one appeal to you, the readers, think of this. If you're listening to this in Belgium or in the Netherlands or in France or in Spain or in Italy or wherever, why don't you ask your government to offer asylum to Assange? Mexico has already motu proprio offered Assange asylum. If you had 20, 40, 50, 100 countries offering Assange asylum, that would be a slap on the face of the United States, a slap on the face of the United Kingdom, and say, look, guys, it is much too obvious that this man is entitled to asylum. Let him go. Just let him go. We in Mexico will take him. We in Bolivia will take him. So there's no reason other than, shall we say, base instincts. They want to punish this man. They want to make him suffer. And that is not unlike this attitude of Nancy Pelosi with regard to Trump. You know from our prior interviews that I am an opponent of Trump and that I am a critic of most of what Trump has done in the last 4 years.
Likewise.
On the other hand, the Democratic Party is being highly irresponsible in trying to now humiliate and punish Trump rather than saying, gosh, we got 11 days to go. Let's
see how the situation plays out. Let the FBI
a transition as smooth as possible, as civilized as possible, as democratic as possible, and of course respect the other side, whether the Democrats like it or not. There are many millions of Americans who voted Trump. So you do not want to have a country that is permanently polarized. You want to have a country that is ungovernable. If you just simply declare all Trump voters to be domestic terrorists, and when you use that kind of inflammatory language, you're actually undermining democracy. Democracy depends on respecting the other side. You don't like the policies of the other side. You don't like Republicans. You have a good right not to. But you cannot take this to the extreme and start using that kind of language that Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi are using right now.
That is a perfect segue to the last two topics I wanted to talk to you about. So, a viewer of the program the last time you were on complained that I interrupted or interjected too much when we talked about Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Cyprus. So I want you. I'm going to try not to interject as much as possible, and so we're going to revisit those topics. So again, explain to us why international law, which you argued is on the side of Armenia in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with Azerbaijan, and then from that also explain to us Cyprus and why you feel international law is on the side of the Greek Cypriots and that Turkey needs to get out of northern Cyprus so that real reconciliation and a united Cyprus, irregardless of Greek Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, can be a harmonious island. So, go from there.
With regard to Nagorno-Karabakh and with regard to Cyprus, we always have to go back to the United Nations Charter, which I always consider a form or a kind of world constitution. Articles 1 and 2 that set down the purposes and principles of our organization make it clear that the organization is based on the principles of state sovereignty, of sovereign equality, of the self-determination of peoples, not necessarily the self-determination of individual countries, but of the peoples who live in those territories, and of course, human rights. Now, in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh, you have Christian Armenians living in this territory for thousands and thousands of years. As you, if you are a Christian and you know the Old Testament, you know that Noah's Ark ended up on Mount Ararat, which is the holy mountain of the Armenians. Unfortunately, now Ararat is in Turkey, but it was an Armenian area, and Nagorno-Karabakh, as I said, has been continuously peopled by Christian Armenians. What happened is that the Ottoman Empire and later the Soviet Empire engaged in demographic manipulation, and they brought in Muslims into this area. And although there was an Armenian majority anyway, the Soviet government actually instead of allowing the self-determination of the Armenians and letting all the Armenians live together, they split them off, and Nagorno-Karabakh became an enclave, or not even an enclave. It became a region under the jurisdiction, under the sovereignty of Azerbaijan. That was already a major injustice because they declared themselves.
And was that the?
At the end of the First World War.
Okay.
And at various times, the Armenian Congress voted for the independence of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is also what happened when the Soviet Union started crumbling. Already in 1988, 1989, 1990, they declared themselves independent from Azerbaijan. And then came this war that lasted until 1994. And then they did manage to establish themselves as an independent quasi state. It was, if you want, a de facto state. And what is shocking, what is upsetting, what is unjust, what is incoherent, is that notwithstanding the progressive development of international law, where the right of self-determination, the right to secession, the right to independence was recognized with regard to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, also the friendly divorce between the Slovaks and the Czechs on the basis of self-determination, the splitting off Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Macedonia, etc., from the former socialist republic of Yugoslavia. So you have all of these other countries, other peoples, some of them even less populous than Nagorno-Karabakh, getting recognition from the rest of the world. But for whatever reason, no one wanted to recognize Nagorno-Karabakh, no one wanted to recognize Abkhazia, no one wanted to recognize Southern Ossetia, whereas their human rights and their right to self-determination is not any less than that of the Slovenians, for instance. Now, take the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of the year 2010 concerning the unilateral declaration of independence of Kosovo. That was back in 2008. The judgment of the court came in 2010. Paragraph 80 of the advisory opinion is crystal clear. The principle of territorial integrity is inferior to the right of self-determination. And the principle of territorial integrity, which was destroyed in the case of Yugoslavia, in the case of Serbia, is a principle that only has meaning in United Nations resolutions and documents, only with regard to interstate relations, meaning state A cannot encroach on the independence or on the territory of state B. State A cannot annex parts of state B. That is what the protection of the territorial integrity is always from external dangers, not from internal dangers. A country cannot say, we have territorial integrity and we have all of these minorities and we don't give a damn about them. They are condemned to stay within the Union. Well, that's not the case. You've seen Slovenia split off from Yugoslavia. You've seen Croatia split off from Yugoslavia. You've seen Bosnia-Herzegovina split off. If they can, international law develops. And essentially that is what the International Court of Justice recognizes in its advisory opinion of 2010. Notwithstanding this advisory opinion, alas, the Nagorno-Karabakh people suffered a massive aggression with super modern weapons from Azerbaijan. You have here a violation of Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Azerbaijan and by Turkey.
So you think you think the recent dust up that happened last year, Azerbaijan was the one that instigated, not?
Oh, no question, no question.
Okay.
No question. I mean, the facts are clear on this. I mean, Nagorno-Karabakh had nothing to win in this affair. They were the victims of massive aggression from Turkey and Azerbaijan with the utilization of mercenaries from Syria. The whole thing stinks. But the mainstream media allowed it. They had no sympathy with the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. And they started using arguments on territorial integrity, etc., that they never used in the case of Slovenia, Croatia, Kosovo. So here you have the double standards. I mean, the mainstream media has been getting worse and worse. And the way they manipulate public opinion is highly undermining the democracy in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Germany. So this is a major problem. Now, going quickly to Cyprus, because we have to end, and I haven't.
Okay, actually, then, very quick question, last question, then on Armenia before we get into Cyprus. Why can't, in order to have a why can't in this territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan, why can't the two sides agree just to have a referendum in which whoever wins, the minority rights of the I guess the Christian Armenian group is respected if it swings to Azerbaijan, or if it swings to Armenia in the referendum, then the then the Azerbaijani businesses and the Azerbaijani community's rights are respected. Why can't they just have a referendum like that?
The United Nations should be calling for a referendum, but the United Nations does not always act coherently and does not always act justly, because the United Nations could have called for a referendum in Crimea when the Soviet Union collapsed. The Crimeans are overwhelmingly Russian, not Ukrainian. And the result of a referendum organized and monitored by the United Nations, had it been held in 1991, would not have been any different than the results in 2014.
Yeah.
Now, why don't they want a referendum in Nagorno-Karabakh? Because it's quite clear that the result will be Armenian. The United Nations is committed, also by an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, to conduct a referendum in Western Sahara. Why doesn't Morocco allow a referendum? Because they know that it's going to be for the Sahrawis and contrary to Morocco, so they block it. They make it impossible. So if there was, shall we say, consistency and coherence in the application of international law by the Security Council and by the General Assembly, then obviously Nagorno-Karabakh would be recognized as Armenian, and the Sahrawis would be recognized as independent from Morocco. And the same thing, the Catalans would be recognized as independent from Spain. And again, Catalan is an issue that I'd like to deal with in another interview.
I've been wanting to do that with
Carles Puigdemont is in Brussels as a member of the European Parliament, thank God. And I've interviewed him on occasion. I respect him very much. In any event, he is the 130th president of the Generalitat of Catalonia. And if he'd be in Spain today, he'd be a political prisoner like the other Catalan leaders who were actually elected to conduct a referendum. They conducted a referendum, and then they've been jailed for it, and the European Parliament has let it happen. The European Commission has let it happen. So, I mean, my respect for the European Commission is like zero. In any event, now going to the commonalities with Cyprus. If there were a referendum in Cyprus, obviously the demographics of Cyprus is such that at least 80% of the population is Greek Cypriot.
Yeah.
And a maximum of 20% is Turkish Cypriot. Whereas there was a diaspora after the separation of North and South Cyprus in 1974. There was no jobs, no work in the north, and a considerable number of Turkish Cypriots migrated out of. And what did Turkey do? Brought in 120,000 migrants from Anatolia, from Turkey, into. They're not Turkish Cypriots. They are Anatolian Turks, and they are in Cyprus. And of course, they have no right to participate in a referendum. The jurisprudence of the Human Rights Committee is very clear that when you have a self-determination referendum, only the natives have a right to vote. I mean, you're not going to bring in bring in settlers and then allow the settlers to vote. But here, already in 1974, the Security Council asked Turkey to remove its troops from Cyprus. I mean, the invasion of Cyprus by the then Prime Minister Ecevit was a violation of the United Nations Charter. It was a crime of aggression. It was a crime against peace. But they got away with it because.
But what do you say to Turks and I mean I have two friends from Turkey, and as you know, Turks are very nationalistic and so forth.
They have a good right to be proud of their country.
Exactly. What do you say to Turks who say Mr. De Zayas, Mr. Yuri, the reason why Turkey had to invade Cyprus and make it and separate the country was because a Greek Cypriot majority was going to persecute the Turkish minority Cypriots?
It was certainly not going to persecute the Turkish minority, nor had it done so. That was the time of Archbishop Makarios, who was actually a very balanced leader and a very, shall we say, very wise leader inclined to reconciliation with the Turks. What happened is that
due to the history of the Ottoman Empire.
Right. What happened is that they wanted eunosis. They wanted union with Greece, as had been, in olden times, and that would have meant that the Turkish Cypriots, who made up 18% of the population at the time, would then have been even a smaller minority within the new reunified Greece that would have included Cyprus. It was to prevent the exercise of self-determination. And self-determination means, I mean, if you have 80% Greek Cypriots who want to be part of Greece, well, that is legitimate exercise of the right of self-determination. So Turkey was not going to allow that to happen. And then they intervened militarily. They expelled 200,000 Greek Cypriots from the north to the south, killed thousands upon thousands of Greek Cypriots. It was clearly a crime against peace under the Nuremberg principles. But they got away with it. Turkey is a member of NATO, and the United States and the United Kingdom protected Turkey from any, I mean, other than this resolutions of the Security Council saying that they should remove their troops, their occupation troops. The European Court of Human Rights condemned repeatedly Turkey for the expulsion of the Greek Cypriots, for the looting of the churches and the convents and the monasteries of northern Cyprus. And what has happened? Nothing.
Are you saying that from that forward, Turkey engaged in settler colonialism because you said that
Turkey does it all the time. I mean, what is Turkey doing in Syria? Turkey is
naked imperialism, yeah.
State, but again, who isn't? The United Kingdom is a rogue state. The United States is a rogue state. Saudi Arabia is a rogue state. So join the club. I mean, Turkey wants to be a rogue state and behave like one and wants and intends to get away with it. And it had shown what it wants to do in Libya. It has shown what it wants to do in Azerbaijan. It wants to reestablish the Ottoman Empire, nothing less. And I think we'll have to stop because I have a new interview coming up. But we will continue. As I said, I'd like to discuss the Catalan issues and the fact that we have political prisoners in Europe, and that the fact that there are political prisoners in Spain who have been deprived of their liberty undemocratically through lawfare. The same lawfare that has impacted Assange, that has impacted Snowden, that has impacted Rafael Correa, that has impacted Jorge Glass, that has
and if people are interested more in this issue of Cyprus, I was going to ask Mr. De Zayas about why the referendum in Cyprus failed, but I'm going to link to a speech that you made explaining how
it's
how we go forward with the Cyprus question.
I was a member of an expert group that prepared a principled basis for a just and durable peace in Cyprus, which I personally gave at that time to Mehmet Ali in Nicosia in northern Cyprus, and I also gave it to Papadopoulos, and it's on the website. You can find it. It's called A Principled Basis. That explains why the Annan Plan failed and should have failed. The Annan Plan was a disgrace, except that I'm sorry because I knew Kofi Annan rather well, and I respected him a great deal. He was one of us. He was from the Secretariat. He was not a politician. He believed in the United Nations and he believed in human rights. But Alvaro de Soto, who was the UN representative, the politician, if you want, in Cyprus, he's the one who concocted this together with Lord Hanning, the Brit. So it was between Lord Hanning and Alvaro de Soto who concocted an absolutely absurd and unjust plan, to which they gave the name Annan Plan.
Which and you say that even though fair representation, fair autonomy would have existed with the Annan Plan, it didn't take into account the fact that all of those Greek Cypriots that were displaced during the invasion did not have the right to the right of return, which is also an issue with Israel-Palestine.
It is the very heart of it. I mean, you have 200,000 people who've been expelled from their homes, whose property has been confiscated. You cannot let that happen. You cannot condone that. And there are hundreds of resolutions of the General Assembly and the Security Council, which, with the Annan Plan, would have been thrown out the window. So what's the use of all of these resolutions? It's the same thing. If you're going to have peace in the Middle East, you're going to have peace in Israel and Palestine, you have to build that peace on the basis of existing United Nations Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, and taking into account the very specific recommendations of the International Court of Justice, in the advisory opinion of the 9th of July 2004 on Israel and Palestine. Anything else? I mean, Donald Trump's absurd, deal of the century, which he, with all this fanfare and all of this propaganda, he tried to make people convinced that this was a viable plan. It got rejected by Mahmoud Abbas within hours of its publication because it was a non-starter. It was a non-brainer. I mean, this is just, it was a saying, we're going to continue humiliating you. We're going to continue treating you like a colony and accept it. And accept it. That is what the deal of the century was. Not a deal at all. So on this happy note, I leave you because I have the next interview.
All right. We are joined on this edition of 1+1 with Alfred De Zayas. This conversation is to be continued, and I hope I did a better job interviewing you on this one because, yeah, a viewer of mine complained that last time I interrupted too much, and looking back, yes, it was not me at my finest. So until then, Mr. De Zayas, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to getting you back on the program. In the near
Happy
future.
New Year. Okay,
Likewise, Happy New Year. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.